Yeah, so my name's John Leslie. I'm 28 years old, currently living in Whistler, British Columbia, originally from a small town just outside of Ottawa called Arnprior, and I've been on the Canadian National Paralympic Snowboard team since 2011. So that's kind of who I am. And then, recently with COVID and international travel and competition being kind of like on lockdown, it's given me a lot of opportunity to like reconnect with my community, old homies, and with a lot of like these charities and foundations that I normally work with, kind of going to more of a virtual like online thing. Like it's just given an opportunity to, I've had ample spare time and, online ways to get stuff done.
So you're born in Ottawa.
Yep.
And you grew up there?
Well, born in Winnipeg.
Born in
actually.
Winnipeg.
There
Okay. Okay. And then moved to Arnprior.
Yeah.
As like with family, I guess?
Yeah. So my dad was in the military.
Okay.
So for the first, like, let's say 5 years of my life, as he exited out of the military, we were in Winnipeg, Germany, Ottawa. And then when my dad retired, we moved to a small town called Arnprior.
Okay.
And I basically started elementary school in Arnprior.
Okay.
So hometown for sure.
Okay. And then you had cancer as a kid there.
Yep.
And that's, okay, what kind of cancer was it?
So osteogenic sarcoma. So that's a form of bone cancer. It's
Okay.
the same cancer that Terry Fox had.
Okay.
So if you're a Canadian, it's a really easy thing to draw a connection to. But
Sure.
living in Whistler, it's crazy because, 90% of people are UK, Australian, or
Right.
something like that. So I'll name drop Terry Fox and they're like, who?
Oh, that's frustrating.
It's frustrating when like 90% of other people, it's
Right.
like the one cancer that like out of all the cancers, like I have the like biggest person to like, you know what I mean? Kind of like explain it.
Yeah.
So yeah, same cancer as Terry Fox. It happened. I was doing growing up in a small town in Ontario. I was playing a ton of hockey, and during the winter there was like a bump that developed on my knee, and we went to the doctor, and they diagnosed it as cancer right away. And I was like on the fast track program for cancer treatment, so it was very stereotypical. Like it was a year of chemotherapy. About halfway through, they amputated my leg. For a worst case scenario, everything worked out as well. There was no complications with surgery. The treatments worked really well. I was out of there after a year and moving on with my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you look back on that differently than you were in the moment?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's been interesting, like the phases, just as you go through life, like the immediate, like because I was 10, so like, from when you're a kid and then, being a teenager, young adult, and now like more mature young adult. Like it's funny, I throw my parents a lot of text messages every once in a while being like, yo, I really appreciate this that you did, like I didn't see it in the time, but
right.
I'm really grateful for it now.
Yeah. When you you go to the doctor and they say you have this cancer as a kid, is that something that you can process? Or is that something that, because I'm assuming then it's a whirlwind of procedures and doctors.
It's crazy. Like you don't, like, something really bad is up, but you're obviously not going to that. So this was like my day. So like you're sitting in class and like the PA goes off, like John and Alex Leslie, who's my sister, like come down to the office. We like get down to the office and both my parents are there. And this is like a work day. My parents work like an hour in the city. And I'm like, okay, this is strange. So we like drive down to the park and my dad's just like, he's a very honest person, like, which is, I think, important because, when he's telling the truth. And he's just like, listen, guys, I got a phone call from the doctor today saying that I had to leave work and come into this appointment. And he's like, I have no idea what we're expecting, but he's like, we're going to have to get through this as a family. So I was like, whoa, starting to freak out a little, like, this is going to be scary. But like, I kind of thought that, like, I was like, oh my gosh, is my leg going to get amputated maybe? Like, is it so bad that I'm going to lose my leg? And then we got to the hospital and they like pulled my parents in and they were in there for like an hour. And then like my dad came out and he had like tears running down his face. And my family doctor had tears running down his face. And like, at that point I was like, this is not good. But yeah, you just ask like what a kid would ask. Like, I want to know what my rate of survival was going to be. So, they said there's a 60% survival rate. I asked if I was going to lose my leg. They said yes. And I was just like, oh, like,
What's going through your head at that point as a 10-year-old?
As a 10-year-old, the first thing I want to do is to like tell my friends for some reason, like not like in a bragging way, but just like, holy smokes, guys! Like I can't believe this is happening. Like, you know, like almost like you're in disbelief, and you want to like, you know, running off of other people just to like make sure you're not crazy.
Yeah.
But you know, like, I think honesty was the biggest thing. Like I was in there on day one with my parents, receiving the same news as them, and you know, there was probably moments where I couldn't comprehend it, but my parents always gave me the Coles Notes version, and like I always had a pulse on my situation, which I think was super important. So nothing overwhelmed me, because from the very first day, you know, the book was completely open, which would be tough to do with a 10-year-old kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I feel like there's got to be no other way though, right? And I'm sure, unfortunately, I'm sure these doctors do this all the time, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, that's why they pull them in first. So it's like, you know, you can kind of viewer discretion with your child and stuff of how much you want them to know about. Yeah. You know, I could have easily gone in there and be like, oh, there's no chance of you dying. You know, that we're going to do our best to like save your leg. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's like, no BS. Yeah. And that's tough, right? Because like if your kid has just been diagnosed with cancer, a close friend, all you want to do is, you know, shelter them and like, you know, like take some of the pain or stress off of them, because you know that they're going through so much already. And, you know, sometimes life's tough, man. You got to wear a helmet and, you know, it teaches you resiliency. So
you're 10 years old and you find out you're getting your leg amputated.
Yeah.
Are you thinking like, okay, what's my life going to be like? Because you said you were playing hockey. Were you snowboarding at the time? Or?
Wasn't snowboarding at the time, just full-time hockey kid.
Okay. Did those things cross
doing
your
a little
mind?
bit of ski racing? Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those were the biggest things on my mind. And that kind of played into like my surgery option, which is pretty neato. So we can get into that if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I had 3 surgery options. So the cancer was like infested in my knee joint. And so the first option was a straight amputation, so Terry Fox style, above the knee, super straightforward. In terms of sport, you know, you can bang on them hard, but a lot more sit down. You know, sit down basketball, sledge hockey, mono skiing, stuff like that was kind of presented to me at the time. Then there was like an internal, like metal bone to replace my knee. It was like a super complicated surgery. Every time I grew, they'd have to go in and lengthen bolts and stuff like that. And then absolutely no chance of doing sport. And then the third option, which was like a Van Ness rotation. So what they do is they cut you above your knee, they cut you below your knee, get rid of your knee, take your foot and stick it on backward. So basically your heel is your kneecap and like your toes are like your tibia, I guess.
Right.
And so that's the surgery option I went with, which is pretty crazy. I should have wore shorts, but yeah, so sorry, I'm messing up poor Ben's angles. But yeah, those are my toes down there.
Okay.
And that's my heel right here. And then yeah, with my brain, I can essentially control a knee joint. So those were the 3 options. You know, the one that couldn't allow me to play sport was immediately off the table.
Right.
And even this one originally was off the table because I was like, that's freaky. I'm never going to have a girlfriend. Like, people aren't going to be friends with me. Like, oh man. But because sport was so important and my parents like knew this, like they went an extra step. They arranged for me to meet someone living with each of the surgery options that I had. Yeah. And when I went, the person, Tim, he actually lives in Vancouver now. Okay. So he was like, I would have been 10, he would have been maybe 14 or 15, and he came and met me when I was going through cancer treatment because he had this surgery. Right. And he like, long hair, he came like hacky sacking down the driveway, told me that he snowboarded, mountain biked, skateboarded. I was just like, oh shit, like life is going to basically be the exact same. So Tim was like my big mentor through all of that. Like he came and visited me while I was at the hospital. And so yes, very long way of answering that. Like sport was definitely a huge factor in like decision making, whether it was about my surgery or, you know, like going through treatment. Just like what kept me motivated was like just getting back out there with my friends, playing sport, you know.
So that procedure, was that more like the risks involved with that one in particular, were they different than the other ones? Like I said, you said
they're pretty it's a complicated surgery. Like it's a 12-hour thing. There's a lot of risk for like rejection and things like that. But you know, at the end of the day, you try it, and if it doesn't work, you can still do the straight amputation option. Yeah. So I was like, but if you start with the straight amputation one, you can't go dig your foot out of the bio bin. And
yeah. So you go through the procedure. You said it was about 12-hour procedure. Mm-hmm. You come out of that. What's the recovery process like, or even?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm getting into too much detail, but basically they leave a little space in your bone, and then the bone connects, and that kind of kills like two birds with one stone. A, like after 6 weeks, you know that the bone's healed, and B, it's like a rejection thing, you know, that your body is accepting the surgery versus like if it wasn't healing and doing stuff. So it was like 6 weeks, just like any sort of like broken bone. Things that really threw, you know, slowness into the whole thing was the chemotherapy, because like you're just so weak. Things are unexpectedly happening. You get infections. Like I had like a nosebleed for like 3 days one time, really? Just because like I didn't have any platelets, and there was no platelets in Ottawa, so they had to like helicopter platelets in from like Toronto because me and this other kid were just like bleeding out of our noses. Wow. Yeah, so it was like random things like that kind of threw some like made the process a little longer. So yeah, like I would say within the year of cancer treatment, if I lost my leg at the 6 month mark, by the end of the 6 month mark on the other end, I was walking again.
Right.
And then once the chemo started, it was like exponentially, you know, with energy, strength, muscle. You know, by the end of that summer, like I was back on my bike again. That winter I was public skating, and by the following winter, like I was snowboarding again.
Gotcha. And the chemo eradicated everything after that period of time?
Yeah, so the chemo is just there to like, make sure there's no other cells in the body lingering around. Like the type of cancer I had really likes to spread, in particular to the lungs and the spine.
Is that something that you got to keep up with even to this day, obviously, like in terms of checks, or is that something that
that's something kind of in the past now, okay. But it was definitely like a huge part of my life for the first 5 years.
Right.
So yeah, you're in there pretty, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like on average, let's say for 5 years monthly, you're in there.
I know you had posted, I think, recently about the hospital that you had spent your time in.
Yeah.
And you had done a fundraiser, I think.
For that. Coming up. Yeah.
Or
December 6th.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool. And what's that? What's the fundraiser? Is that like online or virtual now?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's normally a 24-hour ski and snowboard event that they host at Mount Tremblant.
Okay.
But with, you know, social distancing and COVID, they've turned it into just a 24 hours of activity. So I've got me and a couple friends in Ottawa with we're hoping there's enough time difference, and basically you just have to stay active for 24 hours. So I'm going to, you know, go on some W's with Zach, hopefully do some split boarding, you know, probably hit the gym. And then like if someone in Ottawa, you know, wakes up early, we should be able to just keep someone moving the whole time. But yeah, it's super cool.
As a kid, to go through something like that, you hear these doctors and nurses and everyone that's taking care of you, this important part of your life and those and kids' lives that go through this, right? So what was that like for you in terms of having that support from them? Obviously you had your family and stuff, but.
Yeah, it was like and it's one of those things that you know, like we talked about at the start, it's one of those things that you don't have appreciation for until you're a little bit older, is you don't realize how many layers there is in life, whether it's like, you know, just trying to get to, you know, walk your dog, like get groceries on time, like, you know, all these little things. And, you know, the doctors and the staff for me, from my outlook, like eliminated a lot of those things. Like it made my time at the hospital fun. Like, you know, I wasn't, you know, the hospital is a drag for a kid to start with, and they just rounded that edge, you know what I mean? So I could focus on like getting through the treatment and stuff like that.
Like flash forward to like getting out of the hospital and getting back to your normal life.
Yep.
What's the adjustment like? Because you would have been how old at that point?
So I would have been 11.
11, so the following year.
Spitting out of cancer treatment, and then like it's one of those takeaways. You know, like, you know, had a really good community. So it was like, you know, Armpire at the time was only 5,000 people. So like the local newspaper kept in touch with my family. They had updates for the community, and, you know, we were vulnerable. Like we were going through like an interesting time, but, you know, the community had our back, and they were there through every step of the way. So there was no like, it wasn't like a missed high five at the end of things. So like people were really good with just like taking it slow with me. I was included in everything, but just like, adapting was like the best word. Like I was dubbed the neighborhood goaltender because, you know, I clearly wasn't going to be the best runner anymore, but there was no reason for me not to be able to stop shots. Yeah. So like, you know, when I was still pretty weak after cancer treatment, like when we would play dodgeball, like I was just in my wheelchair and like the fastest, biggest dude would just push me in the wheelchair and just like, you know, so yeah, like the adjustment after that stuff was really just about like being patient with myself and that, you know, having the support from the people around me, like that made that a lot easier because I think I have a competitive nature and, you know, you always want the best of yourself. So when you're trying to learn how to walk again, you know, you got to be like patient and chill with the process.
Yeah. Obviously you went through this process, but it's got to be tough for your parents too, or had to have been tough for the parents to see their kid go through like.
I'm sure it was. Like I think the hardest thing for a parent or for my parents looking back would have been you know, letting me learn some of the tougher lessons in life, whether like when I was in high school, so to speak. You know, you feel like, not to say you feel sorry for me, but like I'd you know, straight up, like I'd been through enough challenge in my life at that point. And so like my parents obviously naturally want to try and deflect any sort of other challenge that comes at you, but like that's just the way the dice rolled for me, you know what I mean? That doesn't mean I don't have to pay car insurance one day, or I'm not going to have to like pay mortgage on a house or anything like that. So if, you know, if in some of those like critical years of your life you start to think that things are given to you or that you don't have to work hard for stuff, you know, I think that was the hardest part for my parents, is watching me work hard.
Right. Because they wanted to give you everything.
Wanted to just give it to me. Yeah.
Do you find, like, kind of on that tangent, like my cousin in Edmonton, she's got cerebral palsy, she's in a chair, and her boyfriend Corey, he's in a chair as well, and he purposely took the handles off the back of his chair because, you know, he's on the bus or stuff like that. People will just try to help him.
Oh, crazy.
Right. Yeah. And so he doesn't want that.
Yeah.
Right. And so do you find that too, where they're like that you had to navigate finding your own path and establishing yourself but also taking that support? Like,
yeah, I think the transition, it like really came at a nice time. Like, that's a good question. Yeah, I guess so. Like, so I got back into hockey, like right after everything, like learned, you know, I wasn't the best on the ice, but I definitely wasn't the worst on the ice, which was kind of sick. But, you know, by high school, like these guys are starting to go for like teams in Ottawa and like junior, and like it's turning into like a commitment that's just like insanity. So it was like, again, just a strategic, like adapting. Like I think I get it from my mom, but I'm not a Debbie Downer. So I was just like, well, you know what is something that I'm going to be quick at, that like what's going to give me the least disadvantage? And I was like, snowboarding. I was like, that's a gravity fed sport. Like you're turning left and right. Like there's no, like if someone beats me with two legs, in my head there was like no excuse for me not to beat them with one leg.
Right.
So like it was kind of high school where I was like, you know, hockey's really not for me, because like I can't, unless I'm given a disadvantage or we're on a similar playing field, I'm always going to be shit. No matter how many push-ups I do, you know?
Yeah.
So then snowboarding was kind of like at high school level, I could keep up. I was actually winning some races. So it was just like, oh, sweet. Like it's, you know, no one sees my one leg because I'm wearing snow pants. Right. It's completely competitive and I'm doing well on my own. And then just at the end of that, you know, like when it would have been starting to get onto like some sort of pro program that I wouldn't have been able to compete with, it was like, oh, by the way, now you can go compete with people with disabilities and like really see how you compare to other people with one leg. And I'm like, oh, snaps.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm lucky. I get to wear pants. You know, my disability is pretty hard to spot. And yeah, again, I think it, like, because my friends were so in the loop with it, like they never felt sorry for me. Like, you know, my friends have hidden my leg, you know, like, oh my God, like last year, like the amount of times my friend Jason, I have screamed at him because he's like taken me on some sort of boot pack mission that like I just can't handle. So my friends are always pushing me out of my boundaries. They don't let me feel sorry for myself.
Which is important, obviously.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, I think to be able to joke about those things too, right? And then how were you introduced into snowboarding?
So my mom was a ski instructor. She has, I think, a similar background to me. Like she did ski instructing in Mount Washington when she was a kid, and you know, there's photos of her and my dad at Whistler like 40 years ago. So she's always had like a connection to the ski industry. So yeah, I'd always grown up going to the ski hill and stuff, but hockey always took precedence over that. So when hockey faded out, I was 15 minutes away from a ski hill. I had a little S10 truck and just threw my board in the back of that.
That's
and,
great.
You know, went out on my own time. It was super awesome.
My buddy had an S10 as well. It was like
92 S10.
Yeah, I think his was. I forget what his was. I remember. I've actually looked for them since because I'm like, I think that'd be a great truck to go.
Right, I know. Just super nostalgic.
Yeah. Did you have a separate prosthetic then for your boot? For your snowboard boots? Or
I didn't at the time.
Okay.
It wasn't until I got into disabled snowboarding that I found out about all these adaptations that you can make to prosthetics and putting heel lifts in and, you know, different angles. So yeah, now I have like a prosthetic that's fully set up for snowboarding.
Right. And then getting into like for Team Canada Paralympics.
Yeah.
What was that process, and like how did that evolve?
So that was pretty sweet. So like I kind of got on a fast track of that. So because I had done competitive snowboarding for like 4 years in high school, like I wouldn't say I had a competitive nature. So like that was kind of like, you know, it wasn't going to take much to mold discipline and a training program. None of that was going to, like a diet, that wasn't going to hit me by surprise. You know, and then luckily there is a huge piece from, you know, the BC snowboard community had just moved to Ottawa. Her name's Cassandra Smith, and she was trying to kind of do a little bit of a jump start with the snowboard programs in Ottawa. And I was like, yeah, we had met at the ski hill, and she found out about my artificial leg. And in 2011, that was the year after 2010. So there's all these legacy programs set up in Whistler to help young upcoming athletes like take advantage of the accommodations. So imagine from the other side of things, you have a 18-year-old one-legged snowboarder who wants to go to the next Paralympics. Like, I had a lot of support to like get into Whistler, you know, like get to all the training camps, you know, like I spent 2011 2012 season on the development team. You know, and most athletes will spend, you know, they could spend like 4 years on a development team, but I spent like 1 year on it, and then I was on, you know, the national team because, you know, it was a give and take. Like I was sticking to the training program, and I was willing to move to Whistler, and I was willing to like commit my life to it. So maybe some skill and some of the other stuff that was missing, they were willing to wait. And I'd say like from my internal perspective, it took till 2014 for me to become like a national team athlete, and since 2014 till now, living the true like it's like I don't want to say it's a lifestyle because that sounds horribly snowboarder, but it's probably just like it's probably the same as you. Like you're never a professional at something like the 10,000 hour rule. I honestly think it's about just jumping in with both feet. Like if you're paying your bills, if you're living your life as a snowboarder, then like you're pro, full commitment. That's what it took in 2014. I was like, if I'm gonna beat these guys like in the United States or in Finland or, you know, wherever in the world that are training full-time, China right now, they're just like pumping out athletes like they're freaking crazy. And it's like, you know, I gotta figure out a way to like work as little as possible and train as much as possible so I can kick butt.
And that's when you came to Whistler in 2013, 14, something like that?
I came in 2011.
2011, okay.
2011, and then, you know, I was kind of taking summers to go back to Ottawa. And, you know, like I was working part-time, and then like in 2014, basically, like snowboarding became a full-time job. So it was like going down to South America in the summers, going to Europe in the fall, North America during the winter, Asia in the spring. Like, you know, like it was just like, you know, following the snow for 4 years.
What's been your favorite place to compete, or what your most memorable competition even?
Most memorable competition? Oh, that's an easy one. So, so that's at Big White. It's a minute ago. It was 2013. I was kind of coming off a bit of a hot streak. I had just gotten 2 podiums in the 2 World Cups leading up to it. And we were like coming into Canada. It was the last contest before the Paralympic Games. It was going to be the first Paralympic Games that snowboarding was ever at. And yeah, we were at Big White, which is in Kelowna, as I'm sure you know. but for the people out there.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a bronze medal. Like in Canada, last contest, like I was the rookie on the team, like no one had expectations for me, and man, oh man, I think like if I got on the podium at 3:00, I was blackout by probably 3:30 p.m. My coach had to like drag me from the award ceremony home. I snuck like a Mickey of Captain Morgan's into my pocket, and we just like after the contest, if the hill's still open, we'll obviously go shred for a little bit after. And,
right.
That was so fun. And then the next day,
the most memorable, but also the least memorable.
Oh yeah. And then the next day I'm like dying hungover, and like they've just announced like the first ever Canadian Paralympic snowboard team, like history has been made, and I'm like showing up to these interviews, and I'm like, I must have smelled like a brewery, and yeah, memorable for sure.
And so in terms of the Paralympic Games, have you competed on like...
Yep. No, so the Big White was the last World Cup.
In 2013.
In 2013.
Gotcha.
And then, in 2014, March of 2014, we headed to Sochi, Russia.
Sochi, right.
So I got 7th in my debut.
Okay.
And that was the top Canadian result. So that was pretty sweet. And then, I also competed in South Korea in 2018. The sport progressed a lot from 2014 to 2018, so we actually had 2 events.
Okay.
And I got 7th in the one and an 8th in the other. So
gotcha.
Yeah, still in the top 10, which is always my goal. And I don't know, pretty stoked on it all.
Are you looking to 2022 as well?
I am. Yeah. It's definitely, competitive sport is expensive.
Right.
And, you spend a lot of time on the road, and it's hard to maintain routines and relationships, like, with stuff that you haven't really developed beforehand. Like, that's what I kind of noticed during COVID was, like, all my friends in Whistler are actually friends that I've made, like, from high school that have also moved out here. Like, I haven't really added any new friends to the quiver since I've kind of taken... Because it's hard to, like... build a relationship and then just disappear for 2 months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's, 30 is a weird line in the sand that people like to draw for whatever reason. So as I approach that, like, I'm just trying to be strategic about how I see my future unfolding. So as of right now, like, I'm training, I'm on the team, I'm working toward it. I think it would come down to financially if it's... I don't want to be paying off snowboard debt in my 30s, essentially.
Is there funding from Team Canada?
There is, but it like makes sense.
For individual athletes?
Individual athletes.
Okay.
So there is funding. So it's kind of comes from 2 ways, but it's a good thing that I always like to explain because I've taken a lot of time to like learn about it, and because there's a lot of questions regarding like the funding in Canada and how it works. I think it's really fair because what athletes need to remember is there's some dude in Toronto working a 9 to 5 and part of his tax money goes towards sport, right? So it's like, okay, like, you have to set your expectation kind of like, he could be interested in, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So there's, when it comes to supporting teams, there's this big so the Canadian government like depending on who's in government, will allot X million dollars for sport, right? The government doesn't have enough people or the knowledge to like distribute that money. So there's a company called Own the Podium. And basically what this company does is they go around and they evaluate each sport in Canada and give them, let's say, a number on 1 to 10 of the chances of them winning medals at the next game, because that person in Toronto's tax money is going toward producing medals at games.
Right.
So from that point, all the numbers get shaken down, and then each program gets a certain amount of money. When the programs have the money, depending on that number, that gives them a certain amount of cards to pay athletes. So because snowboarding gets such a small amount of funding, we get a small amount of cards, but because I've done well, like on the World Cup stage, because that's what it comes down to as results, is I get $1,500 a month. It's like a stipend to put toward living, auto, food, all the things that I need.
Right.
I'm still working a part-time job to make the other ends meet, and then sponsorships and stuff to get me to like Yeah, and then our program. So for our program, we pay for most of our. We don't have to pay for our coach, which is awesome, and they cover a lot of things like when they can. But basically, it's because snowboarding is so new. We've essentially had 3 opportunities to win a medal at the Paralympics. We had 1 in 2014, and then we had 2 at the 2 events in 2018, and we haven't produced a medal. If you look at something like skiing, they've been going to, even at the Paralympics, they've been going to the games since '73. They have medals upon medals upon medals upon medals upon medals. So like the snowball, like it's a very long way of essentially. We're essentially a pioneer in the sport.
Yeah.
And without people pioneering things, I'm just trying to create I want the program to be better when I leave it than it was when I got into it. Right. That's just again it's the reality.
Yeah. Do you see some of that progress happening?
Oh man, totally. Yeah. Like Canada Snowboard, they've totally crushed it. They've done an overhaul in the last 10 years of basically their entire board throughout their whole organization. They're a lot more aligned with snowboarding, and it's cool. It's been really fun to be a part of everything. But sorry, that was a very long way of the funding is definitely very variable from team to team.
Makes sense.
You could talk to a ski athlete tomorrow and, they wouldn't be paying for food or flights or anything.
Right.
Don't talk to a ski jump athlete because you know what I mean? I don't even know if they have a team in Canada anymore. Right. So it really depends on the odds of that team producing medals.
And if you win a medal, is there a reward or
a little bit
cash reward for that, or
I think in Canada, and this is regular Olympics, not Paralympics.
Yeah.
I don't really know what it is for Paralympics, but I think it's might be 10 grand for a bronze, 15 for a silver, and 20 for a gold.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're getting a Honda Civic.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take a Honda Civic.
Honestly, if you talk to any athlete in Canada on a national team, is not doing it for the money. Of course.
I've always been curious about that though. I've heard rumors, but
you're better if you're an athlete. If you're a young up and coming athlete, you'd be more strategic to build sponsorships that have incentives, and then have sign with Visa and make it $1 million if you win the gold.
Right.
At the games.
Okay.
Have something
little
like
tidbit
that.
for
have that in your contract.
Up and coming riders. Yeah. There you go.
Sell it to them. Yeah, the odds are super low, but it's still in there. Yeah. It's just there
you go.
Yeah.
I remember I was in Whistler for 2010 while I was living here, and me and my dad had went up, and they had a massive. I don't know. Were you?
No, I was I was
just interested.
I was 17. I was just a little too young.
Right. Yeah. So, and we watched, I forget her name. Actually, I sent her a message because I was wanting to get her on the podcast.
Oh,
she was the first Canadian to win gold on home soil in the regular Olympics.
Okay.
Marison, is it? She's snowboard cross, I think it was.
Oh, Maelle Ricker.
Maelle Ricker.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. I was just hanging out with her for the last 2 weeks in Pano. I can get you her contact info if she hasn't contacted you back.
Yeah, I DM'd her on Instagram. I don't think.
Oh my gosh, she's not on Instagram. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was just I wasn't expecting.
Did she message you back on Instagram? No.
So I was gonna ask you about her because I remember I was with my dad and they had a massive screen at the bottom of the mountain at the village.
Cyprus, or was this
Whistler?
Yeah, in Whistler. Okay, cool.
I don't know where she was competing.
Yeah.
But we were skiing for the day or something, and it was right in front of the Longhorn Saloon. They had this massive screen, and it was the snowboard cross, and everyone was the women's snowboard cross. Everyone was gathered around.
Yeah.
And that was where we watched the first gold medal won on Canadian soil. And so I remember, and she had flown through. I remember seeing that, and it was just the energy was unreal because it's snowing and everyone's cheering and Longhorn's just going nuts. Right?
It's snowboarding and you're in Whistler.
It's
just sick.
Yeah, and so I had seen something actually with her recently, and then obviously talking to you, I was I should reach out to her. But
you should definitely reach out to her. She's awesome. Because I know who she is through snowboarding, and when I first met her, she was still on the national team, still winning medals. You know what I mean? And
is she local?
She lives in Squamish or Pemberton now.
Cool. Yeah.
But yeah, she remembered my name. I remember being absolutely shocked. She was like, oh, hey, John, like, how's it going? Like, at the start gate, we were in Nikiska. And I was like, Maelle Ricker remembers who I am? Like, this is the craziest thing ever.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, anyway, I would like to think to call her a friend now. So yeah, she's coaching the Canadian national bordercross team now.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's cool.
Her and Jake Holden, who is also an ex national team member.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool.
What was Sochi like? Like, because that would have been your first Paralympic Games, right? Like, what was that like? Because I've heard interesting Russia stories for
definitely
athletes.
Probably, I'm probably on board with like the same stories that people heard or are telling.
Yeah,
it was interesting though, man. Like, you go. So this is something fun that you probably know if you've done interviews before, but I had no idea. Is like the year before every Olympics, they do the Olympics like a dry run, right? Because it's a big TV show. So they do a rehearsal the year before. So like we went to Russia the year before, and so you get to see things while they're kind of still being developed.
Right.
And dude, it honestly, and it's not to talk like, it looked like a freaking bomb went off on the shore of the Black Sea. It was like someone went in there, knocked on every single person's door, and was like, get out.
Really?
They freaking floored it. And then just like built up this like village. Like they just forced people to work to like build stuff, and it was kind of gnarly because the vibe from the very much locals the year before was like they didn't want us there. The year of the Olympics, I think they were like had paid actors in there or something. You know what I mean? So yeah, so it was interesting. So it really gave you an appreciation for like your freedom and some of the things that we take for granted. It was like I still did laugh at some of the things that were happening. Like my shower head in my room faced out, so like, and there's no drain like anywhere. So like every morning before I showered, I'd get like 4 towels and throw it on the ground, and then just like turn on the shower, and like as soon as it was like not freezing cold, like jump in there and start to try and deflect my like, because it was like it should have been this way, but it was like this way, like it just shot right out, like right
into
out
the door.
Yeah, no, like right against the shower curtain. Like it was like you had to like open the shower curtain, like turn it on, shut like the shower curtain, and then it was like you could hear it against it, like spraying on the floor underneath it. And then you like hop in and try your best. Anyway, so but like at the same time, you're like, this is probably because they got an electrician to like plumb this bathroom. I don't know. Like, it was really cool.
Were you rooming with like a couple other people, or was it?
I had
just
one roommate.
Okay.
Yeah, my teammate.
Yeah.
We just dealt with the water in our bathroom.
Yeah.
But yeah. The locals were really nice, like in terms of they were nice when you took the time to like get to know them, and when they saw that you weren't trying to be like malicious or come in and like use their land or whatever. It was quite a contrast to like South Korea, which they were very, very friendly, and like you weren't allowed to have like your cell phone out anywhere near a police officer in Russia. Right, because if they even thought that you were taking a photo of them, they would take your phone.
Really? Eh?
Yeah. Whereas in like South Korea, like I could have taken the guy's hat, put it on my head, had both my arms around them, and like taken a photo. Like the Koreans were really stoked to have the world come.
No kidding.
They were like open arms. They had their crap together in terms of building the facilities, and it was an interesting contrast, but it didn't take away from the pride of like representing Canada at like that's something crazy that again, like it just keeps like as I get older, like it's like holy snaps, like for disabled snowboarding in Canada, I got to do like one of the craziest things. Like I was at the first Paralympic Games for snowboarding. Like, damn.
That's pretty unreal.
It's pretty cool.
What was it like when you, because you did the whole opening ceremony stuff too, right? Where they all come out and you're looking around and there's like this stadium.
Yeah, it's like 50,000 people, like just absolutely going hectic. Yeah, it's crazy. It's exactly what you get all this training beforehand for, and you're sitting through all these training things like there's no way, and then you get there and they're like, oh, this is why they said we were going to be overwhelmed. So it was cool, but you soak it all in. Like, we're lucky in Canada, we focus on like the whole spectrum of the athlete, let's say. So it's like, you know, we work with a sports psychologist and like a nutritionist. So like my sports psychologist and I were all about just like, let's make memories to like look back on. You know what I mean? They're like, don't be going into opening ceremonies thinking about your race. Like, enjoy opening ceremonies. So like, that was a really good piece of advice to get like when I showed up at the front door of Sochi. So I have a lot of really fond memories of like, I really remember opening ceremonies. Like, I really remember closing ceremonies. Like, I remember like Canadians are pretty popular around the world. Like, I would say if, you know how I'm like a Sens fan, I've been also cheering for Winnipeg. Yeah. So it's like everyone is gonna be their original country fan, right? Yeah. They're always gonna, if you're Japanese, you're always gonna cheer for Japanese if it's a Japanese person. Right. But if it's like some other country versus Canada, everyone cheers for Canada for some reason.
Yeah, I've seen some of that. Just like watching TV and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so it was like in Russia, dude. They had the most. That was the biggest audience that I've ever got to like ride in front of. Right. So they had 10,000 people packed into the stands, and it was like I was like the first Canadian to get announced, and like I'm like up a ski hill, and I can feel like the vibrations through the start gate from the crowd, like yelling, and like I can hear like the roar. It's not like it's a roar comes up the hill, and I'm like, oh, snaps! Like,
that's pretty.
This
cool,
is not competing in big white in front of my mom. Like,
that's unreal, eh?
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, I think I've always like had like growing up, you know, playing hockey and stuff too. It's like walking out of the tunnel. Yeah. You know, at Rexall or whatever it was at the time, and these kinds of things that you think about, or you know, kids think about. So to have that experience, I remember watching like people come out in opening ceremonies and stuff, and just looking around like, what a thing,
real? Right?
Yeah, that's unreal.
Totally. It was super cool. And then like, not to like switch subjects, but like it was also really, really cool because I got to go to like X Games too, right? Which was like, as a snowboarder, X Games has always included snowboarding. It took a while for the Olympics, so as a core snowboarder, you know, the opportunity to go to X Games was also like, oh, snaps, you know what I mean? Like, there's people from Facebook here, like, verifying you, and like, have like a VIP band, and it's like, you know, you're like going out to concerts every night and drinking, and you're just like living what you've seen on TV, and you're just like, I can't believe I'm a part of this, like, you know. And yeah, to circle around, like, you have those great experiences, and now as like I go into my 30s, I'm like we said before, how do I make sure that this program is still in place for the next up and coming athletes, or, you know, and hopefully make it better.
Yeah. So. When you're out like partying and stuff at the nights, like does everyone kind of get together and do that? Like, or is there like, or is there some tough competition? Like, what's the word? Is there some gamesmanship, or is like off the hill everyone like competition is friendly?
Not in snow sport. No.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, not to talk smack, but like hockey, like, might be different. You know, but for the most part, like, skiers and snowboarders are friends, Americans and US and Japanese, and you know, it's this really cool mindset, because I think snowboarding, no matter if it's disabled snowboarding or slopestyle snowboarding or snowboard racing or whatever it is, you know, we've always had to come together as a team. Not to say against skiing, but basically against skiing to get into shit. You know what I mean? If it was just like one group of snowboarders versus another group, if snowboarders were always fighting each other, we would have never been able to win the battle against the skiers or fists. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it was like, I think that mentality has continued on. Like, I remember, like, when we were trying to get snowboarding into the Paralympics, it was like I came into the end of that journey, but it was like, the Americans were helping the Canadians, and the Canadians are helping the Spanish, because it's just like, if we don't get this sport to, because, you know, you have to have a certain amount of countries, you have to have a certain amount of athletes, you have to have a certain amount of all these little things, and if you, anyway, so snowboarding has a lot of camaraderie, and like, we just want to, you will hear every snowboarder say this, like, we want to just see the sport progress. Like,
grow the game.
Bro.
Just kind of going back to Sochi, and you said it really put things into perspective, being a Canadian and having these freedoms and luxuries that we have. You obviously having part of your leg amputated, and I will tie this together. It's like, do you ever find when people are like, people might be complaining, whether it's in front of you or in general, just going what you've gone through personally with your leg and even being in Sochi and stuff and experiencing these things where other people may have not, and they're complaining, like, do you ever just go like what's your reaction to that? Because
it's taken me a long time to like, develop the way that I want to react to that question, because, immediately, and like when you're young and immature, like the reaction is like, don't complain. Like, what do you have to complain about? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'd say that like every single person, if you apply the theory that every single person is dealing with some sort of hardship in terms, whether it's cancer or depression or, a disease that you can't see or whatever, if like that's what I take is like you're dealing with something like that. But I'm still going to say, like, that doesn't give you an excuse to not live a fulfilling life, whatever that is for you. So, like, I try to lead by example now instead of, like, having to explain to people, like, hey, you're really lucky. I just go, every single morning I still have to do my little foot stretches and put on an artificial leg. But, like, that's just my shit, like you're going to have your shit and just, like, I just try to, lead by example. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's almost more of a personal growth moment for you even, right? Like from a personal this is kind of what you're saying too, where it's like, it's not about the other person having to realize anything or come to terms, but you use it for yourself. Like,
yeah, like I can't spoon feed someone, but like, I can just like lead by example and try and put the message out there that it's like, I've seen people like figure it out. Like I figured, the excuses are, I think it's more of a mental barrier than anything.
Yeah.
Start small, figure out what your pillars are. For me, it's like friends, family, community. Use those pillars in times of need, give back to those pillars when you're able to. And I don't know, that's where I would start, the no excuse process.
Yeah, definitely. Where do you think, according to you, what's your current perception on like the progression of Paralympic Games moving forward and maybe the attention it gets or doesn't get, or what could be improved, or what, if anything?
Good question. I think my theory has always been whatever you apply to regular world, in some sort of ratio or percentage applies to like the para world. So I wouldn't say it's a problem with para sport. I'd say it's a problem with all sport, is we're kind of living in an unrealistic, like we're going to build every 4 years a new facility like for Olympics and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know. I think we really need to scale down the expectations that we're putting on athletes and countries to facilitate sport and try and make it a more, efficient thing. Otherwise,
saying it's so grandiose almost.
It's so it's like, we should just have like, in my opinion, like I think Vancouver or Calgary would be just a great winter Olympic venue. So it's like every 8 years we host a winter Olympics. We use the money to update our facilities. Canadian athletes, international athletes have access to the facilities, and it's like, it's being reused, repurposed, and then it's like the money that Canada has can be put into the programs, and you know what I mean? Like,
well, I just read too, I think there was it the Olympic Committee to ask someone, or there was another bid potentially going in for Vancouver 2030?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
which, like,
it's cool, but it's like just stick to one city.
Yeah.
Like, just pick one city, keep the facilities nice, and then other things too. Like, and I don't want to talk smack about like the Olympics and Paralympics, but it's like you go there and there's vending machines everywhere with like bottles. It's like, what day and age are we living in? It's like we should be recycling. Everyone, I'm an athlete. You should give me an Nalgene or some sort of reusable bottle when I show up to the Olympics with the Paralympic logos on it, and then have refill stations. Man, put Gatorade in the refill stations if you really want to. But it's like, you see it with, I like to think of myself as, I've been really lucky to be educated. I think I see a lot of the problems that are happening in the world. I'm not an expert by any means, but it's like, it's pretty far off to the other side of like the way the world's kind of going right now. And I feel like the Olympics and Paralympics need to align better with the modern world that we live in.
Interesting.
And if they want it to survive.
And I guess so, maybe on that same wavelength, like when someone says, because I know when the Olympics came here in 2010, it was, as it is probably everywhere, but particularly here is very controversial for probably some of those reasons in certain parties or certain groups, right? Do you still think it's a great event and it's awesome to have? I
think so.
What about the other camp, which is like, I don't want any of my taxpayer dollars going here?
Oh, I completely agree with that 100%. Yeah. I was like absolutely blown away that 50% of Calgary didn't think that an Olympics was like good for the city, because I'm obviously very biased, and I would be willing to have an open conversation with someone to say it wouldn't benefit the city just from what I know. But that just shows me there's a huge disconnect between athletes and the community. And honestly, it was that was the year that I started my non-for-profit, and I was just like, I'm not trying to be a hero, but if even 50% of athletes, it should be in our contracts as Canadian national team athletes to have to put a certain amount of days back into the community. Right. Otherwise, the community's never going to see
like
the
an
tie.
Contract.
Yeah, they're never going to see where their tax money's going. You know what I mean? Like, if the dude in Toronto's kid had some, 4 of the national team speed skaters come out to their school for the week and do a bunch of gym exercises and stuff, and they're coming home and telling them, it's like, oh, all of a sudden, like if that had been happening in Calgary since the last Olympics, it had grown into their culture. Like, wow, look at this. Look at like what happened. We had an Olympics and then just bam, like it got rooted into our community, and like where it stretched, like that didn't happen. So like, or maybe it did, and that's just the way they feel. But I think that I think there's a disconnect between, the taxpayer and seeing their tax money at work, because there's athletes everywhere. Like if you had like a Tinder for athletes or something, like there would be like so many within our radius right now. And it's just like, I don't know if it's because it's not an obligation like in a contract or what it is, but for me personally, I would like to see more athletes getting involved in the community, and then on that note, opportunities for athletes to be able to do that confidently and like share on a platform that they want to share on.
I mentioned too, like NHL contracts, I think, or something. I'm sure NBA, NFL, all these ones, but I think they're a lot. They, according to their contract, they have to spend.
Oh, do they?
Or they have to start a nonprofit. I think I've heard this. Right. Yeah. But so something like that would at least give, you're saying, the taxpayer some tangible.
Yeah, like don't have. I mean, you can if you want, but it's like, after the Olympics, don't have like a parade through downtown Vancouver with all the athletes like on their high horse. You know what I mean? Like create these like, I don't know, they did this really cool one after 2014 where like they sent all the athletes to Ottawa, and then one of the days we went to like 500 schools between all the athletes, just like bam, like went to all the schools, and all these schools were a part of the like post-Olympic celebration. And like I thought that was really cool because like, it's I'm not expecting every single person to be phoning schools every single night after training being like, hey, can I come say a speech? Like there kind of has to be a pathway for that. But yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I kind of got lost on a tangent there.
No, it's interesting. What's your nonprofit all about?
So it's called Loving Winter. Basically, like my vision is to see skiing and snowboarding incorporated in the Canadian public education system. And yeah, so basically like break that down into smaller objectives. As I try to work with as many schools, try to work with as many physical education teachers as I can to build program, like 1 week programs for schools.
Cool.
Yeah. So like North Vancouver is a great example where these schools are going on weekly trips to Mount Seymour. They have ski trips planned throughout the year, but like, you know, they're not taking any opportunity to like learn how to put on a binding in the class, or like what's a left ski boot, what's a right ski boot. Like for someone like me, this is easy. It's the same as my hand. Yeah. But if you're a family that's immigrated to Canada and your parents weren't into snow sports, and you're 10, like they're gonna end up getting made fun of because they put the wrong ski boot on the wrong foot, and then it's gonna turn into a negative thing. Or like even worse is when you see like COP is a tough one because it's so cold there. You see kids from families that have come from outside of Canada and they don't show up to the right equipment, and then they're sitting in the cafeteria all day. Yeah. They're not allowed to participate because it's too cold. Right. It's like, why didn't you take one day in gym class to like look at the kids, all your students' equipment? Yeah. So that's what we do. We cool. Go in, we get the kids doing like basic balance and agility drills. We teach them some of the safety. We go through their equipment, and we just like have this super fun week strategically before a ski trip.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. When'd you start that?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right
It's
on.
small. It's just me.
Yeah.
I just, it's more of I call it a non-for-profit. It's like more of a passion project. Right. Like I end up putting more of my own money into it but it's something I really believe in. And when I think about like legacy and the mark that I want to leave on this world is like, if by the time I'm gone, we live in Canada. We have 9 months of winter a year. And if you were to lay a map of every city in Canada on top of every ski hill in Canada, like use Vancouver as an example. We have 3 ski hills within 4 million people. Yeah. So it's like the fact that it's not part of, like in Australia, swimming is part of their public education system.
Right.
I think that winter sport should be a part of ours.
Interesting. I think that's a sound argument.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know growing up in Edmonton, we didn't quite have mountains like this, but
you still have Rabbit Hill.
Rabbit Hill. Like, I was gonna say.
Dude, I work in Edmonton. Edmonton's another great hub. Like, yeah. Freaking and every single day at Rabbit Hill, ski schools, buses going in there.
Yeah, I remember.
And all these kids totally unprepared. Well, not all of them, but like. I'm not trying to create national team athletes. I just want weekend warriors. Yeah. Like, I don't want to see the ski and snowboard industry die. And, when we were talking about, like, the Olympics and the way I see it going and, like, Paralympic and able body is, like, I want to see more people enjoying disabled sport. Mm-hmm. And I think that the key to that is to see more people enjoying winter sport. Right. You see more people enjoying winter sport, and that just translates into more disabled people enjoying winter sport. So
that's interesting because I haven't had this conversation with anyone, and maybe I will down the road. But I've listened to conversations about like men's hockey, women's hockey, using hockey as because it's what I know more of. Like, why does men's hockey get more attention and women's hockey doesn't, and what are the ways you can make that better? Right, and I think that's kind of the same wavelength, right? And
I would agree. I'd say there's a lot of that in para. Is like there's a lot of argument of like why isn't a Paralympic gold medal when we talked about the award thing? Like the U.S. I don't know if you heard last year there's a big announcement that Paralympic medals now get paid the same amount as Olympic medals. But I don't know, man. I'm open to the argument of why. Right. Like para sport isn't pulling in the numbers that regular sport does. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just the reality, man. Like, you got to know how the world works. Like, if people are going to make money, they need to sell a product, and to sell a product, the product has to be good. Like, so I think though that like what people are missing is either room for strategy or motivation to make change. And I think in para sport we have a really good storytelling opportunity. So it's like for me, I never saw myself as the best, or I never saw myself as like a pro snowboarder. I saw myself as someone who's involved in the community. You know what I mean? And that's how I work with sponsors. And I don't have Nike signing me or anything like that, but I have like cool brands that work like so I think it's about being strategic and not having your head up your ass. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if we lived in a completely fair world, that would be great, but It's not the case.
Do you think there could be a time when they're equal or like they get equal exposure or close to equal?
I think so, but I think it would look completely different.
Yeah. What do you think it would look like?
I think it would have to go more into the storytelling. Like,
right.
Like if we're talking about Olympics versus Paralympics right now, I think the Olympics is a great sporting event for that purpose. So like when you're watching the hockey game or the whatever, like more sports style, like if you're watching TSN, that's what I think of the Olympics.
Right.
When I think of the Paralympics, what would work well for us? Have you seen like Drive to Survive on Netflix?
No.
The F1 thing. I see us being like a Netflix documentary.
Right.
You know, where they dive into each sport. They spend a little bit of time talking about these athletes and these crazy things that they've had to overcome. And then a very small section would actually be dedicated to like watching the sport. Right. So there'd be more storytelling involved. That's just my personal opinion.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting.
I don't see it looking the same, and I think that's where potentially people run into error is like, you know, like, yeah, like they're trying to play on the same playing field, and it's just like, well, you have to play on different playing fields. You know, it could still, you could still net the same revenue. Yeah. But you just have to play on different playing fields.
Just go into different methods. Yeah. That's interesting. On a separate tangent, I don't know if we are rolling or not. Like Whistler and COVID, and it was busy, and locals getting kind of, you know. Yeah. And Whistler's, as long as I can remember, Whistler's been that kind of a town, like a tourist town. Yeah. Right. You know, and I mean, I'm not like I'm 27. It's like not that I've been around a long time. But I just read about this new ski resort in Squamish. Did you read about that? That's been approved.
Did it get approved?
I thought it got approved.
Yeah, I did see something floating around on the Whistler buy and sell about that.
Let's say it did or didn't. Regardless, let's say it's in the works. Yeah. The multi-billion-dollar ski resort, and I know there's locals there from various communities that probably would be opposed to something like this. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? And what would it mean? One, for Whistler. I mean, you've been in Whistler long enough as somewhat of a local. Like, is this good for commerce? Is this good for people? Is this good for locals?
I mean, this is an interesting subject. I think I would have to know more about it. Yeah. My personal, call it arrogant, doesn't have a good pulse on what's going on in the world. I'd love to see a second ski hill in the Sea to Sky corridor. Yeah. I think it would really help just, you know, spread like how many people, more opportunity for jobs, education, whatever those positive spin-offs are when you're living in make-believe fairyland. Yeah. I think, and this is just a current trend in my life right now, is I'm trying to gain a lot more knowledge on like the indigenous land and, keeping all of that into like perspective. Agreed. So like I don't know where they're building. That would be my main thing, is if they're planning on building this on like reservation land, it would be an immediate no. Yeah. Or if they haven't had talks with like the local community, or if they don't, I don't know. But that would be my biggest, that's what I'm trying to educate myself in the most, is I call Whistler home. I see myself living in the Sea to Sky corridor for the foreseeable future. But dude, I have zero education on the history and the culture here, and it really bums me out. Yeah, me too. And I think that's kind of where it comes from. And we don't have to get into it. And I was just kind of curious. Yeah. But that would be my selfish John that doesn't have a care in the world, and let's build a second ski hill. Totally. Yeah. I would have to look a little bit more into like the environmental impact and the cultural impact it's having. Like, again, like it's sort of like the thing we're talking about with the Olympics and stuff like that. Like, is that sustainable in today's modern world? Or should we be trying to create more mountains similar to like Shane's Mountain? Have you heard of Shane's up in Terrace? No. So it's just a community-run mountain. Okay. So everyone that buys a season's pass is like a part owner. Like, when they got to do maintenance, they just get a few of the boys from around town to go up there with chainsaws. Like, it's a lot more slack country and stuff, but it's like, it's sustainable. It like makes sense. Like,
do you think that that's scalable to a resort? I mean, it wouldn't be a resort at that point.
Yeah, I guess it's not.
You know what I mean?
Anymore.
But like, could something like that operate at the scale
in Squamish? I think that is already happening in Squamish. Like, I think if they just like Smithers is a really, really cool spot for that too, is they have Hudson Bay Mountain, but they have all this slack country that's like super well mapped out. Like, it's not like they get a little bit of vibe in the Sea to Sky corridor of like all these secret spots. You know, let's not let people go there, you know, and then it's like making people that are trying to be adventurous and get into dangerous situations where like I walked into the snowboard shop in Smithers and like I was asking them about their slack country, and normally if you were to do that anywhere, like, oh, we're not going to tell you about our secret spot, oh, just go ride the mountain, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh dude, like come check out this map. They laid the map out for me. They were like showing me the good zones, like they have all these like marked trailheads, and it was like really, really cool. Like I was just like, oh sweet, like, you know, it's human powered when you're split boarding, you know what I mean? Like yeah, and again, that's my hippy dippy version. Like I get we have an economy, like the world still needs to spin, we need to see some jobs, but like I think the world's changing, and you know, I think old ways of I think we have to be creative when we're thinking about, like, when we think about ski resorts, I don't think we should be thinking like Interwest, Tremblant, you know what I mean? Like that's so, I mean, like, I'm not planning on having a job to make that much money to enjoy a place like that, you know what I mean? Like,
do you think the prices in Whistler are on par for what they should be? Like, let's just say for skiing.
Gosh,
like,
I mean, I don't think
I don't even know what the cost of living is there
like,
right now, too. I think it's probably...
Well, cost of living's crazy, but, you know, you get to live in Whistler. I'll always argue that, like, Whistler's really expensive when you try to do everything. Like, if you're trying to have a gym membership and, like, a dog and a car and a snowmobile and have a 1-bedroom and work part-time, like, it's gonna be expensive. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what you live just outside of Edmonton if you want to do all that, right?
Exactly.
Like, Whistler's fine if all you want to do is ski. Like, it's great for that. Ticket price is pretty much $200, I think.
For a day pass?
For a day pass. I think it makes it it doesn't turn it in, it turns it into a 1% sport instead of like a thing that, as Canadian, like I said, like we have nine months of winter, we're exposed to this. This is like our mountains are an Australian's ocean. You know what I mean? And you know, in Australia, you're not getting charged to jump in the water and go surfing. So the fact that like there's families or people that are not able to enjoy this sport because it costs that much money, like, I think there could be a meet in the middle.
I agree. And I think I know, once again, I'll go back to hockey. I'm just broken record here, but I know hockey's an extremely expensive sport for families and for kids, and let alone to go to a hockey game. And I know it's different, you know, you go to a baseball game in the States, like, you know, it's like the price of a beer or some tickets, right? Like, your beer costs more than your ticket. I was
gonna say, I think they had like I saw that one time. It was like a beer, a hot dog, your ticket, and T-shirt. And it was like $15. I was like,
I know. And it's probably for all that and take your family to a hockey game, it's $1,500.
Yeah.
Or to take them on the ski hill to Whistler, right? But I guess that's is that just because there's more incentive placed on the tourist, or that kind of
in a spot like Whistler, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, maybe like when you ask the question about the spot in Squamish, like if we're just going to put in another version of Whistler, like I don't know how much, like we need to see more Mount Seymours in the world. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like locally owned, you know, like just they're solid the earth people there. Like, you know, I'd love to see something like that in Squamish, because like Squamish is a lot more of a local, like that's where people that have done their days in Whistler, you know what I mean? They go to, they end up falling to like Pemberton or Squamish to like to be able to buy a house and to be able to like live a little bit more of not just a ski bum lifestyle. So it's like to have, you know, a spot there for them to be able to like go out on Bunny Hill with their kids and stuff. Like let's see some night skiing go in somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, because
there's no lights on Whistler, is there?
No, there's no light. So it's like, you know, again, it makes it hard for mom or dad to take their kids out after work, and then it just turns into this weekend warrior shit show where it's just like where it's just like you take one look at Whistler on a weekend and you're like, that's a tourist, you know what I mean? And it could just be like you know, your mom and dad from Pemberton who finally have a day off trying to take their kid out for skiing.
Yeah. I forget what I was gonna say. It was just a tangent on that. It wasn't even really important. I guess I was gonna ask what you've got going on and right now, and some plans for the future, or if you want to
totally like do a little
pull
plug.
some plugs. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely came into this with a little plug.
Yeah.
I wanted to like first like just definitely take the opportunity to thank you guys, like Ben and Dylan, for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming out.
I think, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I think one of the reasons why, you know, maybe I stood out to you is, you know, it's cool seeing people thinking outside of the box during all this COVID stuff. You know, when times are hard, I've been seeing two types of people: the people that are going with it, you know, hustling, grinding, figuring out a way to make this possible, and people not so much. And, you know, when I took some time to look into the media company, and like, you know, the most powerful story for me was with the woman playing the saxophone, I believe, and having the people come out. And it's just such a good reminder in, you know, everything that's going on in the world, how such a small, simple thing can make such a positive, impactful, you know, moment for someone else. So, you know, I am striving to do that, and there's nothing special about me, you know. I'm just some one-legged dude that snowboards, you know what I mean? Like, I'm still struggling to take my dog out for a walk, paying rent, cell phone bills. I got all that stuff going on. So thank you for letting me come down and like share what I'm up to. This is like a great amplifier.
Of course.
And, you know, in terms of like day to day, like I'm just, like we said at the start, like reconnecting with my local community, you know, doing fundraisers for the hospital where I was treated at like 18 years ago, and like doing stuff with the Terry Fox Foundation. And yeah, and to the people out there, you know, take the if you can make the person walking down the street smile, you know, take the opportunity to do that now. So yeah, thank you for having me, and you know, these pieces are really cool.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man. I mean, like you said, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you making the trip, and like,
yeah,
it was great getting to know you.
I mean, the weather ended up being pretty damn nice today. Like,
not bad,
dude. I got to drive. Like, I was just ocean, mountains. Like every 50 kilometers, it got to like 4 degrees warmer in the car. I was like, sick.
Yeah, I mean, I'll link a bunch of your stuff in the descriptions and stuff too. But if there's anything that you want to add in there on audio.
Yeah, no, I mean, just like, you know, my website for my non-for-profit is lovingwinter.org. If you want to follow me and what I'm up to, the best spot for that is my Instagram, which is DU John Leslie.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
John, cool. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude.
Cheers.